Well, thank you, Anthony, for that introduction. Thank you to CEDA for the invitation to appear here today. And most of all, thank you to all of you for getting up early on a rainy Thursday morning. We're living through a period of rapid digital transformation. Part of that is around the explosion in just the sheer volume of data about the world and about us. Part of that is the incredibly rapidly growing processing power enabled by cloud computing. And part of that is advances in data science by people like Anthony and researchers at a wide variety of companies. And those things have come together really in just the past few years to enable exciting advances in artificial intelligence. And the promise of artificial intelligence is to really enable us to make advances in a broad range of human endeavors, almost any place where intelligence is helpful. But AI also raises new societal issues, as Anthony alluded to. And so it's really important, if we want to get the benefits of AI, we need to be very thoughtful about those issues. So that's what I'd like to spend about 20 minutes on today. But I'll start with just a little bit around, what do we mean by artificial intelligence? And that's something that's been discussed for 50 or 60 years. It almost gets into sort of philosophy and existential questions around what is the meaning of intelligence, what is the meaning of consciousness, that sort of thing. On the screen is a photo of a young Alan Turing, the great UK computer scientist. He coined the term AI back in the 50s, and he proposed a test, now known as the Turing test, for determining when we would have achieved intelligence in a machine. And his test was, if you were interacting with a machine, and this would have been by text in those days, and you couldn't tell if it was a machine on the other end, that's pretty intelligent. And that test is prescient in that today we have Cortana from Microsoft, a digital assistant, Siri on the iPhone, Alexa from Amazon, Google Now, which are trying to do exactly that, enable people to interact with computers in a natural way. And you still know that it's not a person on the other end, but we're getting there. Today, the heart of AI is really enabling computers to better understand the world, which can then help us to understand the world. So for example, vision. Until just a few years ago, if you had a photo on your computer, the computer sort of knew, if you want to anthropomorphize the computer, it sort of knew that it was a photo because it had the JPEG format, say. And it knew the date that you took it and the location because that's in the metadata for that file. But it didn't know what it was an image of. Just in the past few years, we've made enough progress that a computer can detect patterns in pixels and say that's a dog, that's a cat. And of course, that's available today at a consumer level from Facebook, Google, Microsoft, lots and lots of companies. Speech. Computers hear sound, and now they can take that sound and turn it into text. Microsoft just announced in August that our basic researchers had actually attained parity with humans in the error rate in transcribing sound to text. About a 5% error rate is what a person would typically achieve, and we've achieved that with computers too, under ideal circumstances, a quiet room and that sort of thing. And then language. This is taking text and actually understanding the meaning of the text, which is much harder, and that's sort of at the cutting edge. So when you have a computer and it reads some text like, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, computer's like, what do you do with that? So there's a lot of nuance to human language, but we're getting there. And then knowledge is the ability to reason over vast amounts of data. So how can computers learn? Basically, computers learn the same way people do, which is through experience. So, the toddler touches the hot stove, learns that it's hot, doesn't make that mistake again. For computers, experience equals data about the world. And learning is about looking for patterns in that data. Once the patterns are found, computers can make predictions and then learn from mistakes. So a key element of AI systems is that they get better the more they're used. Data is fed back into the system. So every time you watch a movie that Netflix recommended and then you say, yeah, I like that movie, the Netflix recommendation algorithm gets a little bit better for everybody and for you. The promise of AI, if we really boil it down to its core, is that it can enable us to make better decisions. And that's a really big idea, because we're making decisions all day long in almost every field of human endeavor. And one of the interesting insights of cognitive psychology over the past 10 or 15 years is that people are actually not that good at making decisions. We have all kinds of implicit biases. We weight too heavily something that happened yesterday as opposed to something that happened a month ago. We weight too heavily something that might happen tomorrow as opposed to a month from now. Computers don't have those kinds of biases. Computers can reason over vast amounts of data. They never forget anything. And they're really good at probabilistic reasoning. But what computers don't have is empathy. They don't have built-in a sense of fairness, judgment. And so what we really want to do is marry the best aspects of computers with the best aspects of people. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But let me show you an example of how an AI system can really enable us to sort of extend our capabilities. I've been doing a lot of work in the past few years in the accessibility area. So this is making our software accessible to everyone of any kind of ability. And so I picked an example from that space. It's called Seeing AI.
I'm Saqib Sheikh. I lost my sight when I was 7, and shortly after that I went to a school for the blind. And that's where I was introduced to talking computers, and that really opened up a whole new world of opportunities. I joined Microsoft 10 years ago as a software engineer. I love making things which improve people's lives. And one of the things I've always dreamt of since I was at university was this idea of something that could tell you at any moment what's going on around you.
I think it's a man jumping in the air doing a trick on a skateboard.
I teamed up with like-minded engineers to make an app which lets you know who and what is around you. It's based on top of the Microsoft Intelligence APIs, which makes it so much easier to make this kind of thing. The app runs on smartphones, but also on the Pivot Head smart glasses. When you're talking to a bigger group, sometimes you can talk and there's no response, and you think, is everyone listening really well, or are they half asleep? And you never know.
I see two faces, 40-year-old man with a beard looking surprised, 20-year-old woman looking happy.
The app can describe the general age and gender of the people around me and what their emotions are, which is incredible. One of the things that's most useful about the app is the ability to read out text.
Hello, good afternoon. Here's your menu.
Great, thank you. I can use the app on my phone to take a picture of the menu, and it's going to guide me on how to take that correct photo.
Move camera to the bottom right and away from the document.
And then it'll recognize the text. Read me the headings.
I see appetizers, salads, paninis, pizzas, pastas.
Hi. Years ago, this was science fiction. I never thought it would be something that you could actually do, but artificial intelligence is improving at an ever faster rate, and I'm really excited to see where we can take this. As engineers, we're always standing on the shoulders of giants, building on top of what went before. And in this case, we've taken years of research from Microsoft Research to pull this off.
I think it's a young girl throwing an orange frisbee in the park.
For me, it's about taking that far-off dream and building it one step at a time. I think this is just the beginning.
So that project started off as a hackathon. A bunch of developers came together, they got a lot of pizza and Coke, and they said, hey, we could build something like this, and started working on it. And the hackathon idea actually has become a product. We launched it here in Australia 2 days ago. So if you have an iOS device, an iPhone, you can download that today. So I'd like to touch upon 3 aspects of Microsoft's vision for AI. The first is our core concept is we want to build systems that augment human capabilities. The idea is to see AI as a tool. It was a tool, as we saw in that video, a tool to help us make better decisions. So it's not really around replacing people, as sometimes people fear. It's around making people more efficient and more productive. The second thing I would touch on is we want to make AI available to everybody. And this is really deep in Microsoft's DNA, if you will, going way back. At the beginning of the 70s and 80s, the beginning of Microsoft, computing was an IBM mainframe, and Bill Gates came along with the idea of there ought to be such a thing as a personal computer, which was a novel idea at the time. Many people said you don't need a computer in your home or at school. And of course, that came to pass. Everyone has one. With AI, we want to do something similar. And so we're building it into all of our products, but also every capability we build, we're exposing out through programming interfaces so any developer, any place on the planet, can have those capabilities too. And so the ability to see what's in a photo, the ability to understand text, the ability to extract meaning from text, all that is made available to the entire developer community. And then we're building what essentially is like the largest AI supercomputer in the world, and that's the Azure cloud. And that's to enable any organization to run its own AI analyses in the cloud very efficiently. Then the third part, and this is really sort of the heart of what I'm working on, is we feel like we really need to build AI systems in a way that they earn trust. As Anthony was alluding to, there is a fear of the unknown. There is a sense of, what are these computers? How do they make decisions? What's this all about? And if we are to achieve the benefits of AI, we have to get people comfortable sharing their data if we want to be able to make decisions about people and deploying these kinds of systems. So there's a set of issues that AI raises, and we want to be thoughtful about them. One is just safety and reliability of these systems. And self-driving cars is the obvious example, but if you have a surgical robot or something, you want that to be safe. If you're making lending decisions, you want to make sure your system is reliable. And given the black box nature of these things, people may not feel comfortable. But there's things we can do to ensure reliability. When developers build these systems, they need to plan for unexpected circumstances. So what happens if suddenly there's an obstruction in the road? What should the car do? Or if you say to the car, take me to the airport the fastest way, and then a blizzard comes up unexpectedly. The system needs to know, don't literally go as fast as possible in a blizzard. We need to prepare for bad actors. Just like we've seen all these data breaches in recent years. AI depends upon data. So a bad actor could actually try to break into a data system and change the data. So we need to really focus on security. We need to be very thoughtful about how people interact with these systems. There may be times when, most of the time, we actually want an AI system to be an input to human decision making. One of the things that AI systems lack is common sense. They lack the common sense today of even like a 2-year-old. And so it's important that we have people in the loop as well. And then finally, lots and lots of testing, just a basic practice. We want these systems to be fair and non-discriminatory. And you might ask yourself, like, how could a computer discriminate? You wouldn't think it would have the kinds of biases that people have. But discrimination could arise in two ways. One is you might have a system that's built on data that's not representative of society as a whole. And so, for instance, if you built a facial recognition system or an emotion detection system on 100,000 images of Caucasian faces and then tested the system on Asian faces, it likely wouldn't work as well. Or it might be that you have data that is representative of society as a whole, but to the extent that society reflects structural racism or sexism, that will be reflected in the data. And there's a risk that the output of the AI system then could just perpetuate that. So we need to be very thoughtful about these kinds of subjects. On the screen is the results of a search that somebody did in Virginia a few years ago. An African-American kid just did an image search for 3 black teenagers. And the images were mostly like those on the left. There's a lot of mug shots. They weren't very pleasant. And then he typed in for kicks 3 white teenagers. And it was all like, happy time and kids playing basketball. And then there were headlines saying, is Google racist? Of course, Google isn't racist. They didn't program the system to do this. The system went out and looked at the data available, which is images on the internet, and sadly, a lot of the images on the internet of African Americans were of this nature. And so then we have to think about, well, do you want to change the algorithm to present a more positive image? And these are like value decisions that we need to make as a society. In the US, there's software that is used to help judges make decisions in sentencing convicted defendants. It doesn't go to the length of the sentence typically, but maybe the level of security of the prison. And there was an article in ProPublica magazine, this is a DC-based online publication, that won a Pulitzer Prize. It's called Machine Bias, and the subline is, there's software used across the country to predict future criminals, because they were looking at recidivism rates, and it's biased against blacks. So very, very striking. What can we do to address this? First thing we need to do is attract more diverse people to the computer industry, and that's something we need to do for a wide variety of reasons. Here's one more. These systems are mostly being built by young white men, so we need to attract greater diversity. We need to develop analytical techniques to tell AI researchers, do you have a good data set to train your system? And if you do have a good data set, is the output nevertheless biased? And there's a whole community of academic research going on right now. It's called Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency in Machine Learning. And Microsoft is very supportive of the work of that group, and some of the leading people in that group are actually with Microsoft Research. And what we need to do, and we're working on this right now, is develop guidelines for developers who may not be thinking about these kinds of questions. Here are the steps you need to take to build a system that's fair to everybody. Third area I would touch on is privacy. This topic is much bigger than artificial intelligence, of course. With the digitization of our lives, we have all this data around. How is it being used? AI, though, kind of raises the stakes on both sides. The benefits are greater than ever before. It's not just, oh, will I disclose my address to some company and then they can mail me a package? It's more, can we get better healthcare outcomes? But then, of course, we're disclosing more sensitive data about ourselves. And there's something special about AI. The whole privacy paradigm today is based on you make a decision to share something and to get some benefit. But with an AI system, things can be inferred about us that are true, but maybe we had not chosen to disclose. And so Facebook could look at someone's Facebook feed and figure out their sexuality, very easily. Spotify in the US can look at what music you listen to and figure out if you're more for Trump or more for Clinton. These things correlate, very clearly. The example on the screen was an incident 5 years ago in the US where a man came into a Target store. This is a general purpose retailer. And he was upset that the retailer was sending his daughter, who was 16, advertising circulars for pregnancy-related products. He thought this was just completely outrageous. The store manager apologized, every way he could. Dad came back 3 weeks later, Store manager is getting ready to apologize again, and the dad says, no, I'm sorry, I have an apology for you this time. It turns out there were some extracurricular activities going on in my house I didn't know about. She is pregnant. And so Target knew before the dad, even though the girl is living at home. And it wasn't as if she was buying a bassinet. This was early in the pregnancy. It's far more subtle things like buying unscented perfume. So we need to be very thoughtful about privacy as well. And part of that is building the best possible controls so that people can make decisions. And at Microsoft, we're working on a project that actually involves 300 engineers. It's something I kicked off when I was in my role leading the regulatory affairs team, to sort of knit together all the databases we have about people so that if someone makes a decision to say, delete that data or show me the data you have about me, we can actually comply and do that. The way it's been the past few years, the databases are sort of here and there, and it's very hard to connect them together. So that's a lot of work. We need to work on accountability so that people who have our data are accountable for keeping it secure. And as you may know, there's been a series of very significant data breaches in the US and elsewhere in recent years. And we need to be very transparent about what these AI systems are doing. And that's another challenging topic because they're very hard to explain. The last thing I would touch on is the automation of jobs. And this is actually the number one thing on the minds of a lot of people. There have been reports by McKinsey and others that over the next 10 or 20 years, AI could enable the automation of as much as 40% of tasks, not jobs, so tasks, so maybe parts of jobs. And the question is whether some entire job categories go away. So what do we know about this? We know that we're not very good at predicting the future. And so we don't actually know what will happen. We know that in the past, technological change has always eliminated certain job categories and created new ones. What we don't know is will that be the case with AI or not? Here's a story from the New York Times in 1928. March of the machine makes idle hands. And the concern was that automation at that time was taking away factory work. And what would this mean for the economy? And John Kenneth Galbraith, probably the greatest economist of the 20th century, was very concerned about this at that time in 1928. And it's interesting looking back at it because this was actually smack dab in the middle of the greatest period of productivity growth the world has ever seen, which was 1870 to 1940. This is a photo of New York City. That's the Flatiron Building. It's 5th and 23rd in 1905. And what you see is a lot of horses. Horses created a lot of jobs. It's a lot of work to take care of those horses and to clean up after those horses. And 20 years later, same scene, the horses are gone. All those jobs are gone, but then there's the automobile industry and the rise of Detroit. So again, the question is AI somehow different? And it might be, we just don't know. But we do know that technological change is driving so much of the economy, and we need to get the workforce prepared for a 21st century economy no matter what, and we know the stakes are high. And so we really need to focus on lifelong training. So starting at the grade school level, doing a much better job in science and technology and math training. And I don't really know what the situation is here in Australia, but in the US, we're far behind other countries. We really need to do a better job on that. At the college level, all the job growth in the United States is for people with 4-year degrees. 2-year degrees, we've seen some job growth, and if you don't have a college degree, there's actually been a 13% decline in jobs over the past 25 years. So we really need to increase the skills of the populace and think about 2-year training programs that will be in reach for more people. And then finally, we need to think about lifelong training, because technology is changing so fast that what you learn 1 year, it's not going to be applicable necessarily 10 years down the road. So I would just conclude with some work that's going on across the industry to try to think through these kinds of questions. We've created an organization called the Partnership on AI. It was co-founded by Microsoft, IBM, Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook. Then about 50 other firms have joined. The group had its first meeting in Berlin a couple of weeks ago. And the idea is to set up working groups across these companies with civil society, with academics, and think through what are the best practices relating to privacy, transparency, security, reliability, accountability. Develop them into guidelines, and then maybe over time some of that could even be standardized. So that's the work we're doing. We're super excited about AI. There are these issues that need to be dealt with, and so we want to be very thoughtful about them so that we can get the benefits. Thank you very much.